type out, okay, one challenge that you encounter for question D first. Okay, one particular burning challenge or difficulty. Okay, what is one particular challenge? Okay, I'm observing the chat. Okay, and if I don't see anyone responding, you're probably deemed too good for this question. They'll probably get you to present. Now, question D. Right? Cannot remember framework for demand and supply change question. Right, okay. And what about the rest? Hey, Zach, Ash, and Elijah? Linking a recession using economic explanation. Challenging question. Framework, I think not very strong. Okay. Hey, what about Elijah? Okay, so the rest, okay, I want you guys to... I can't remember more than on potential effect or increase. Okay, great. Okay, so for the rest of the students, okay, who have participated in this activity, okay, I want you to bear this in mind, okay, when we go through the outline together. Okay, so I think just now Elijah brought up a very valid point on how to come up with an outline. Okay, so I figured that would you all like me to go through with you the thought process of building an outline together? Yeah, okay, so that will help you in your future essay planning, especially for the H2 students. Okay, very important. H1s also, for the large questions, you can consider using this approach. All right, okay, for case studies question, it is very important, okay, when you approach the question to have the end goal in mind. Okay, when I mention end goal, you need to deduce, okay, what is the concept that is tested. Okay, or what is the topic that is tested in this question. So if you look at your challenge, okay, I believe that only one of you brought up, okay, the keyword or brought up the framework. Okay, so I just want you guys to make a second guess. Okay, what framework do we need? Someone brought up that the framework is challenging, but what framework is that? Or what topic do you think is related here? And so far, I think Nat got it correct. Okay, so if you guys are a little bit more adventurous, you can probably put your answer to everyone. Okay, so everyone can see your... Right, okay, we have Zach, demand and supply, okay. What else? All right, how do we know it's a demand and supply question? Okay, or to be more specific, when do we need to use a demand and supply framework? Okay, I want you all to focus on these few keywords here. Right, number one, okay, you can see that there is an increase in fuel duty. Okay, if you haven't highlighted this, please highlight this. Okay, number two, you can see that there is a recession. Okay, and number three, this is the most important part. Okay, total expenditure. Okay, in fact, this question came out for H2 A-levels paper. Okay, this is one of the few times that expenditure question came out for H2 paper this year. And normally it comes out for essay, but for some strange reason, this year it came out expenditure for CSQ. And it's a good refresher. Hey, for those who wants to see the question paper, drop me a PM. Okay, I can send you the PM for this year's paper. So how do we know these three keywords actually tells us that this is a we are going to use demand and supply framework? Of course, we have to guess lah. All right. So now, okay, let's make logical guesses. Okay, if you were to look at the extract question, the extract tells us which extract is that? Extract 2. Okay, it tells us that okay, fuel duty and VAT, VAT valorem tax, value added tax, actually push your fuel prices higher. So we can see that these two are categorized together, right? They are grouped together. So if you're totally clueless, okay, you can consider relating fuel duty to a tax. If not, there is no better way to group them. Agreed? Okay, so it's going to be a tax on fuel. So now, okay, where have we learned the concept of tax? Okay, under demand and supply. So how is tax going to affect demand or supply? Hey, type it out. How is tax going to affect? Is it going to affect demand or supply? All right. Okay. So supply. All right. So you can look here. Okay, if you have your book, okay, it's always good to stand by your book. Okay, we can flip to page 6. All right, page 6. Okay, you can put here under government policy, tax and subsidy. Okay, you can bracket here, tax and subsidy. These two. Okay, so I won't be going through excessive content here, but we can actually borrow concepts from webpages. Okay, under G, government policy. So this is an indirect tax. Okay, it's going to reduce your supply curve. Okay, and it's going to make producing fuel more costly. All right. Okay, so this is how we connect the dots. Okay, we see a tax. Okay, then we got to suspect that this is going to result in a fall in supply curve. Okay, or probably an indirect tax. Now, okay, what is this? Let's fast forward a little bit. What is the second point? Okay, or they mentioned recession, right? How is recession going to affect, okay, your demand and supply framework? Which is going to be affected? Which one do you all think is going to be affected? Now let's look. Okay, we have recession here. Recession is actually at the very last paragraph. Okay, we can see that recession is here, right? Okay, if we were to look in front, it's going to affect your income. Do you see the word income? Right, so income is going to result in, okay, great, okay, I do see your response coming in. Okay, there's going to be a fall in demand, right? Okay, so here, okay, it's under page 4. Okay, this is your demand framework, the factors or determinants of a demand. We can actually see that income, okay, is used here. Okay, we don't necessarily need to see recession, okay, but recession is almost always related to income. Okay, and for my H2 students, okay, if you have learned YED, then you have to make the assumption that it's a normal good. Okay, if it is an inferior good, okay, then the entire assumption will be different. Okay, so make the assumption of a normal good. Okay, so we can see that a recession is going to affect the demand of fuel. Why? Okay, because of lower purchasing power. Okay, so this is how we connect the dots. Okay, so this is related to demand. So before you even pen down, okay, this is how you want to construct your outline. Okay, if you look at your question, okay, so you can actually scribble here. Okay, so this will lead to a fall in supply. Okay, fall in demand. Okay, and then after that you can expand your outline. Okay, so a lot of the students will be doing scribbling like that. Is everyone good so far? Now, okay, this is the most important part. A lot of students, I want you to check your outline. Okay, have you addressed what is total expenditure? What is total expenditure? What does it mean? What do we want to find out? Okay, in economics, okay, expenditure has a very, very specific illustration. Very, very specific. Okay, good, Nat. Okay, very, very sharp. Okay, for the rest, okay, you can make a guess. Okay, this is one of the harder questions, but This is the reason why we are tackling this question. So the next time that you encounter such question, okay, I hope you guys will have greater clarity. So sometimes, okay, they will use expenditure. Sometimes they will use producer revenue. Okay, I believe you have encountered such questions before. Right? So I will not confuse you guys. Okay, most of the time, expenditure and revenue are pointing to the same thing. Most of the time. Okay, so you want to put a mental note with the exception of a tax that's involved. Right? So when there's a tax involved, your total expenditure, your consumer expenditure, consumer spending. Another word for expenditure is consumer spending. Okay, you can put consumer spending. Okay, most of the time, consumer spending and producer revenue is the same. Okay, in the exception of a tax. Then, okay, consumer expenditure will differ from producer revenue. But today we don't need that. Okay, today we don't need that. We just need to look at consumer spending. So I'm just going to show you how to identify consumer spending. Now let's look at the book again. Okay, you can see here. Okay, I'm just going to go to page 8. Okay, page 8 is by right. Okay, not used to illustrate consumer spending, not used to show that. Okay, but I'm just going to show you how do we illustrate consumer spending. And meanwhile, if you have any questions, please type it out. Okay, this is a very small, intimate class. Okay, I like to spend more time addressing questions. All right, so just now, only one of the students got it right. Okay, for consumer spending, we are concerned about equilibrium price multiplying by the quantity. Okay, so how do we establish that? We can see that, okay, this is your initial equilibrium price and your quantity, right? Which is determined by the intersection of your demand and supply. Okay, E0, do we see that? Okay, so we can see that the equilibrium price, okay, will be, let's put a 0 here, or origin here. Okay, the vertical distance between the origin to P0 multiplied by your horizontal distance between origin to Q0. This, okay, little rectangle, okay, will be your total spending. Okay, we will be using this as a basis to build our point later. Okay, so there are two ways to illustrate. Okay, later on I will show you. The easiest way is to always show 4 points. Okay, if in order to show any increase or fall in total spending, you need to show 4 points. So I will recommend you to establish origin, okay, and label the intersection here. You can call it A or you can call it E0, doesn't matter. Okay, so the total spending here will be 0, P0, E0, and Q0, which is your price times your quantity. Is everyone clear? Can we must use this later on. Now make sure you define that. Okay, consumer spending. Okay, so now let's move on to our main point here. Okay, so we can see that there's an increase in fuel spending, and you are supposed to deduce how is this going to affect your total expenditure. Okay, so I'm going to break out how is it going to look like in your writing later. Okay, so your very first paragraph, okay, I would recommend you to define all the key terms. Okay, so what is a recession? Right? Okay, what is a fuel duty? Right? And you need to relate this to demand. Okay, you probably need to define demand as well. That's if you successfully identify recession as a demand factor, right? Okay, you want to identify supply, fuel duty as a supply factor. Okay, it's an indirect tax, define that as well. Okay, and you also want to define consumer spending. So I'm going to list these 5 points. Okay, so this is your paragraph 1. Okay, if you are doing a full outline, okay, these are the terms that you don't need to write out in full, okay, but you need to write out in point form. What do you intend to write out in the actual writing? Right, so your second paragraph will be your body paragraph. Okay, so your body paragraph, you probably want to start off with a good topic sentence. Okay, so you want to start off with the first point was fuel duty, right? Okay, so fuel duty. Okay, so you need to deduce how will fuel duties, okay, result in a change in your consumer spending. Hey, remember, consumer spending or consumer expenditure based questions are always concerned about the before and the after. Alright? So now I'm going to go through this simple activity. Okay, I want you all to make a mental note. Okay, so especially for supply factors, very, very crucial. Okay, you can join me in this drawing activity. Okay, it's not necessary for you to draw this in your outline. Okay, but I'm just showing you, okay, what's the importance here. Alright, so just now, okay, we identified that a fuel duty is going to lead to an increase or fall. It's going to lead to a fall in your supply curve, right? Yes? So now, okay, what is missing here? Okay, obviously without the demand curve, we can't tell what's the consumer spending, right? So what is the key assumption here? There is an exceptionally important key assumption. So we know that the overall increase in factor price, is it? Yeah, so yeah, we know that a fuel duty is going to make production of fuel more costly. And so production costs will go up, increase in cost of production. Yeah, so we have to make an assumption on the demand curve. It's only particular in this situation that we need to make an assumption on the demand curve. Okay, so what is the assumption that we need to make on the demand curve? Okay, so for my H1 students, this is a very popular question. Case studies, they love to test this. Okay, let me give you a little hint. Okay, it starts with the concept of elasticity. What elasticity do we need to assume? Which one? Right? Okay, we need to assume your demand to be price demand, elastic or inelastic. Okay, so I'm going to show you, okay, a negative example first. So a lot of students, okay, will not make an assumption. They will go in and illustrate, okay, a simple demand curve. All right, so this is the most amateurish mistake, okay, because you cannot find, okay, the consumer spending as a result. Okay, so I'm going to show you the second error, okay, that some of the students will draw. Okay, let's say, okay, if you draw a demand curve that is sufficiently flat. Okay, what does sufficiently flat tells you? Okay, what is the PED of a curve that is sufficiently flat? Is it elastic or inelastic? It's elastic, right? Okay, so we can see that. Okay, now let's draw the 4 points. Okay, you can join me in this drawing activity. Okay, and I hope after going through this, okay, you will not get this question messed up again. So we can see that the initial 4 points of your initial spending is 0, P0, EQ0. Yes. Now what happens when when your demand curve is sufficiently elastic? Okay, as a result, we can see that when there is a fall in supply, okay, we can see that there is 0, P1, E1, Q1 as your final consumer spending. Is everyone following me? So now, okay, what can we deduce about the consumer spending? Has it went up or went down? Okay, consumer spending went up or down? It went down. Now I'm going to draw the counterpoint. Okay, this one it can be drawn relatively quickly. Okay, you can join me in this activity. So now all you need to is just to reverse. Okay, just make the demand curve as steep as possible. Steep as possible. Okay, so for some of the students who have been with me for some time, okay, you realize that I'm very anal about this. Okay, and you will see the full magic behind this. right? Okay, so we can see here. So if we were to tilt the demand curve sufficiently towards clockwise, okay, you can see that your demand curve will be inelastic and your consumer spending will go up here. Agreed? Okay, when your demand curve is sufficiently inelastic. So what is the bottom line down here? It tells us that there can only be one correct answer, right? And it all depends on your elasticity of your demand curve. Okay, so the worst scenario is you don't make an assumption. Okay, then that will be an exceptionally amateurish mistake. So the second mistake is you make a wrong assumption. Then you will end up with a different outcome. Agreed? So now I want you guys to look back at the question paper. Okay, are there any mentionings about consumer spending? Or anything that suggests your PED elasticity? Alright, so you can actually see here, as a result, okay, of your VAT or your fuel duty, motorists are spending more on petrol. So what does it tell you when motorists are spending more? Okay, so which one is going to be the correct scenario when motorists are spending more? Is it scenario 1 or scenario 2? And the extract already suggests that motorists are spending more. Right, okay, so it's going to be scenario 2. Okay, the question already necessitated that spending goes up. Okay, so PED has to be sufficiently inelastic. Okay, so now let's go back, okay, on working on your supply point. We identified that a fuel duty is going to reduce supply. We identified that PED is going to matter. Right, so how is PED going to matter? We need to look back at the question. Okay, so most of the time, the question will give us sufficient evidence to suggest the PED. So in this case, the question gave us the outcome, okay, that consumer spending went up. Sometimes the question can give you the determinant itself, right? So I'm going to show you where to get the determinant. Okay, you can flip to your book. Okay, it's actually under page 12. Okay, we'll go through this, okay, in the future in depth. Okay, unfortunately, it's not used today. Okay, but you can make a logical deduction. Fuel, it has to be a necessity good, right? You probably use fuel in every single production. Okay, so you can deduce that your fuel is a necessity. Okay, nature of good. Therefore, it's going to be inelastic. Okay, you have to make this logical assumption, and together with what the extract suggests to you that consumer spending went up, then you can make you can deduce that scenario 2 is the correct one. All right, so after drawing this diagram, okay, the most important part is to show. You need to link back to the question. Okay, so the link is always relating to your initial and final spending. Right, so I suggest you can use these 4 points: 0, P0, EQ0. Okay, and you can mention that, okay, your total spending went up, okay, as a result of your demand being inelastic. Why is your demand inelastic? Oh, because the extract suggested that consumer spending went up. Oh, because fuel is a necessity good. Okay, and then you go on to illustrate that because of your demand curve being inelastic, as a result of an increase in price, your quantity demanded fall less than proportionate. And when it fall less than proportionate, okay, your consumer spending will go up from the initial 4 points to the final 4 points. Okay, so this is how you want to build your first point. Okay, with the end goal in mind. Is everyone following me? Okay. So this is the hardest part. Okay, we are done with the hardest part. Okay, so this is your paragraph 2. Okay, what about paragraph 3? Okay, it's a recession point, right? So for the recession point, okay, Fortunately, it's going to be easy. Why? Okay, because we have gone through elimination. We know that supply is already been exhausted. Okay, so in this case, we won't be talking about supply anymore. Right? Okay, so all we need to, okay, is to illustrate changes in your demand. All right, so I just want to state clearly here, for whenever you encounter supply factors, which requires you to identify spending or producer revenue, you have to assume PED. PED is a must. Okay, it's exceptionally crucial. Okay, we can see that if you don't assume, you're going to get two different outcomes, right? Okay, but when there is a change in demand factor, okay, it's not that complicated. We don't need PS here. Okay, it's not that the other way we need PS. We don't need PS. Okay, if you don't believe, okay, later on after the class, okay, you can try to tilt your PS. No matter how you tilt, it's going to be the same outcome. Okay, so don't make the silly assumption. I've seen a lot of students trying to reinvent the wheel. Okay, then they embarrass themselves. All right, so your consumer spending will go in the same direction as your demand. Okay, so let me repeat. Your consumer spending will go in the same direction as changes in your demand. If demand goes up, consumer spending goes up. If demand goes down, consumer spending goes down. Okay, so let's quickly wrap this up. Okay, so can we confirm again, a recession will cause your demand to go up or down? Up or down? Can you all type out up or down? Then I will draw. Right? Okay, so a recession, just now we have uncovered, is going to lead to a fall in income, fall in purchasing power, right? Okay, fall in purchasing power, okay, and fall in demand. Okay, and when, let's look here. Okay, so same, we are going to apply the same principles. Let's look out for the 4 points. Okay, 0, P0, E0, Q0. These are the 4 points, right? Nothing new. Now, as a result of a recession, okay, demand will fall. Right? So what can we see here? Okay, we can see that your 4 points will become 0, P1, E1, Q1. Okay, so your consumer spending actually went down, right? Okay, so there's a shortcut here. The shortcut here is to identify this as the loss of your spending. And later on when I go through the answer, I will show you another way to illustrate the 4 points. Okay, but as for now, let's stick with the easiest 4 points only. Okay, we don't use different rectangle A, B or C. We won't use that. Okay, is everyone good with how to build your third paragraph? Okay, remember to show. Now, okay, I'm going to go through the final point. The final point is going to be the challenging point. Right? So, we know that from paragraph 2, paragraph 2, your consumer spending will go up. From paragraph 3, your consumer spending will go down. So your 4th paragraph or your synthesis down here, okay, is to justify what happens to your consumer spending. So what's the overall effect on your consumer spending? Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay. I think y'all can hear. Yeah, my soundproofing is not very good. 1 second. Okay, I want you to think through this question. I'm so sorry. This is what happens when you have a dog at home. Okay, can y'all hear the barking? Is it very loud? So what happens to the consumer spending? Come. Okay, the overall effect is based on the relative changes in demand and supply. Okay, next, your approach is sound, okay, but it is good when you want to address quantity and price question. Okay, it cannot address spending-based question. So net actually brought up the overall effect is based on the relative changes in demand or supply. Okay, so I'm going to illustrate why is that so. So remember, okay, no matter how much your supply curve shift, right? Okay, the underlying principle whether consumer spending goes up or goes down is PED. Okay, it's not the extent of your supply curve shifting. Make sense? Okay, so what you want to compare is these two. Changes in demand versus your PED. So it's important to identify that we cannot find an outcome first. We must acknowledge that it's not determinable, indeterminable. Do we agree? Okay, so whether your consumer spending will go up or go down depends on these two factors, right? So which factor is going to be more dominating? So for instance, okay, if your demand curve is going to shift lesser, okay, a lesser fall in your demand. Okay, what could have caused a lesser fall in your demand? For instance, okay, if your fuel is a necessity good, for those H2 students, okay, you will learn that okay, your fuel is between YD0 between 0 to 1, right? So when there's a recession, okay, your demand will fall, but it won't fall as much. Then we can compare. Okay, a slight fall in demand as compared to okay the very first point where your demand is sufficiently inelastic. Okay, then we can address that your consumer spending is likely to increase. This is how you want to justify. Okay, alternatively, we can look here. Okay, if you're not a H2 student, we can always play around with this PED. So the assumption here is PED is less than 1, right? Okay, is it going to be less than 1 indefinitely? Are there any possible changes to the PED? Could there be? For instance, okay, can there be a development or can there be a substitute that is developed? Okay, biofuel could be. Okay, so in the long run, okay, if we can use biofuel as a subsidy, then your traditional fuel will be price demand elastic. Okay, when PED becomes elastic, then we will go into this condition, scenario 1. Okay, consumer spending will go down. So overall, the last point requires you to identify indeterminable first, before okay we question the assumption behind okay the demand factor and the PED factor. Okay, which one is going to outweigh the other and why? Okay. Hey, good try, Nat. Okay. Okay, just that it's not appropriate for this question. All right. Okay, so I want you guys to look at your initial challenge. Okay, have we kind of addressed your initial challenge? Okay, let me do a quick scrolling again. Have we identified the framework? Were we able to relate recession to economic explanation? Okay, challenge for okay framework we have decided already. Okay, so Elijah, okay, have you addressed using the correct framework? Yeah. Yeah, I have no idea why my dog is like barking like so loud today. Maybe she needs the bathroom. I don't know. Hey, can we move on to the next question? Yeah, we move on to the next question.